Welcome to What the Frac, the podcast that dives deep into the world of fractional professionals. Join us as we feature insightful interviews with the 2024 Fractional Conference speakers. For more information and to stay connected, visit www.fractionalconference.com.
Welcome to the WTF podcast. I am your host, John Arms. We are here to talk about what the frac, and that is a fun way to talk about the fractional conference and all things fractional. That's our job here, is to sort of illuminate and shed light on this whole new economy, the fractional economy. And with that mission, we bring wonderful, amazing guests who have decided that they want to chime in and share their thinking and their gifts with the world. With me today is Dr. Amber Wright. Do I call you Dr. Amber?
Yes, you can call me Dr. Amber. Absolutely.
Well, welcome to the WTF podcast. From Atlanta. Welcome from Atlanta.
I'm from Atlanta, north of Atlanta. Atlanta folks are very territorial, so I like to be specific. I mean, we live north of Atlanta.
Really? It's not just Atlanta. You have to say like north, south, east, west.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for those of you who are coming from Atlanta, you know this. Those of us who are not, we just learned some new geography information.
Yeah.
So, we're going to talk today about, we're going to talk at FRAC about this, but we're going to talk about communication and leadership and a lot of dimensions about that. And this is your thing. This is what you've decided to study, to get a doctorate around. It's a share and inform people on that. And I just have to first say how grateful I am that you have chosen to share what you've learned with the rest of the world and what you do and what you'll do at FRAC. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation and also the conference in the fall. I keep saying every time I see you, this is my first time in Minnesota, so I'm always excited about those things as well. But yeah, I'm elated to be here.
Yeah, well, my son lived in Atlanta for a little while.
Okay.
And the two things Atlanta and Minneapolis have in common, it's definitely not the weather, but it's the food. They're both markets where like people love. There's great restaurants in both cities.
Sure. Yeah, plenty of stuff to eat. I don't know that we'll ever eat it all. There's so much on every corner.
It wasn't until my son moved there, I finally had my first chicken and waffles. I'm like, those don't go together, but they do. They go together.
They do. Yeah, I'm originally from Southern California, so Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles is a mainstay there. So that's, when you have it there for the first time, you really set the bar pretty high.
You'll discover a lot of soups and stews when you come to Minnesota. It's cold up here. We got a warm comfort food.
Yes, we love comfort food. I love to eat, so I can't wait.
So I'll do a little, for those of you listening, welcome. We're glad you're here, both listening live and listening later. Share a little bit of information up front. I want to share that the fractional conference, we call it FRAC. It is the FRAC part of the WTF podcast we have here. And that is in October. You can go to the fractional conference website and you'll find all sorts of stuff, tickets and information, access to what you don't have to wait until then to connect with Dr. Wright here or anybody else who's speaking with our wonderful list of speakers or participants. So you can find that there. And then you'll also find, we just completed a great survey on the state of fractional. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. Yeah, it's I'll share an interesting stat. When I first started teaching how to become a fractional pro, this is 6 years ago. I mean, it just wasn't a thing. We were called gig economy. And then 2 years ago, we sort of adopted this term fractional.
Okay.
And I think at that time, 2 years ago, there was about 2,000 people on LinkedIn that said, I'm one of those. I'm fractional. And the last number I heard was north of 150,000 people just on LinkedIn saying, I'm a fractional pro. So, it's a big deal. It's here. There's a lot of reasons for it. But let's talk about communication in fractional, because fractional is inherently leadership, and leadership is inherently great communication. And this is your sweet spot. Tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about it and the change you want to make in the world by teaching people about great communication.
I am passionate about communication, John, because I have realized over the 20 years that I've been talking about this, that it's not enough to tell people that you got to communicate. We like to say that, you got to communicate more, but that means something different to everyone. And I think that we have to give people tools, because it's not always so much that they don't know, that they don't want to talk or engage or communicate effectively. They just may not know how. Because when you think about it, where do you really go to learn how to be good at communicating, even though it's the one thing that we're all responsible for?
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? Like, what did you get your degree in, your undergraduate degree?
My undergrad degree is in speech communication. That's what we called it. It was so long ago. That's what we called it then. Now it's just like general communication studies. And my master's is in interpersonal communication, because I was really fascinated by the way communication shapes our relationship experience. And that also harkens back to why I'm still so passionate about it, because it informs the way that we navigate personal and professional relationships. And my doctorate is in organizational change and leadership. I think I didn't need a third degree in the field. So this kind of allows me to take what I've learned as a communication expert and deepen that work in the leadership space.
It's so important. It's so important. My degree is in journalism from the University of Minnesota. And when you say that, right, like, where do you go to learn it? Where did you build the skills? How do you what courses, what books, all of that? And when you said that, I realized I studied journalism, communicating, right? And my minor was in English. And so the written word is not lost on me, but it is interesting as I sort of think back through the arc of my time in business, which goes back to 1991. The lack of good communication, the lack of understanding what it is, even being, like you just you go to meetings and you go, well, this is terrible communication.
You're like, how did you get this job?
It's really something. So the more we can help people on these dimensions, and let's just call it what it is. Maybe we didn't learn it right. Maybe the world has moved past the way we learned communication, but it's one of the most critical skills, but I think also one of the most underutilized.
Absolutely. The way that I look at it is you brush your teeth every day, right? But you still go to the dentist at least once or twice a year, at least, to make sure that you're brushing effectively.
Just to make sure.
When it comes to communication, and especially because there's so many different channels by where it comes by, or how it comes through, how it gets channeled, we've got to have those tune-ups to make sure that we're doing it effectively. And that's how I look at my work, not so much as a dentist, but as someone that's here to remind people about, or remind them of how important it is to be mindful of the way that you're showing up communicatively in the office and outside of it. So
for those listening and everybody who's either a practicing fractional pro or someone aspiring to be, or people hiring them, I'm guessing you've got, obviously we're going to be all over your website. We're going to be all over your LinkedIn, like absorbing, oh my gosh, I can become a better communicator. But without giving away everything that you're going to talk about, give us a little bit of skills for leaders, communication skills for leaders, and how we can hone them and what we need to know.
Yeah, so we'll drop a little bit of a teaser here. And what I consider communication skills that influential leaders need have to do with presence, people, and persuasion.
Presence, people, and persuasion.
We love alliteration. So presence, people, and persuasion. So we won't dive too far into that today, because we want you to come to the conference to go into that discussion with me. But I really think that I think what I can say and share now, in order to have influence, or to really be mindful of the fact that you have influence, is thinking about how you leverage it and to what end do you use it. And that has to do with how we are communicating with self, how we communicate with others. And then when it comes to persuasion, especially as someone in a leadership role, it's why in every movie we see there's this penultimate, a moment of climax, effectively, where the troops get rallied, and that always comes by way of some type of speech, some type of cheer or chant. It's all verbal, nonverbal. It's all of these things. And so that has to do with persuasion for me. And I think that as fractional leaders, we've got to remember that as well, that we're still part of the team that's responsible for charging up the people and inspiring them. And that has to do with how good you are at persuasion. So,
One of the first things you said there, which just stuck with me for a second, did you say how we communicate with ourselves?
Yeah.
Okay, you got to talk about that. I mean, it's all amazing, but I'd never heard anybody say that before.
Oh, absolutely. So often we focus on interpersonal communication, so communication with others and relationships and such. But intrapersonal communication, communication with the self, is you spend the most time with yourself. It's the one relationship that endures 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so you've got to think about, what am I saying to myself?
I never thought of that.
That might come by way of journaling or affirmation. Like, there's so many different channels. I talk to myself. I don't know if you do, but
all the time.
I talk out loud to myself all the time. So we do it, but it's naming that and naming the power of that and the impact that that has on how we're showing up as leaders is what I'll be discussing in this session.
So you and I were talking about a book, a couple of books before we started the program. The 10X is easier than 2X.
Yes.
And actually, I think I picked this up from one before that. It was Greg Olson's book on, I can't remember, I should know that. But anyway, the habit that I learned and picked, this is a while ago, but was read a great book that builds you up for 10 minutes every single day. Just 10 minutes every single day. And that is great, right? And I try to follow that. But what I'm hearing from an I may not get that all right, but I journal at least a half hour every day.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's me communicating with myself?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
See, I learned stuff. Fractionals?
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, I never had that in that context, but in the context of what you're going to talk about and what you're great at is, this is great communication. This is the ingredients of it. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are these things. So the beauty of journaling, if we could stay there for a short second, is if we know that growth is inevitable or change is inevitable. Okay. Growth is a choice, but change is inevitable. It's so satisfying to me, John, to be able to go back to my old journals and see what I was thinking at some of my lowest and best points in my life. Even now, I've been an entrepreneur in some capacity now for 12 years. I've done a variety of different things, but I always say that entrepreneurship is equal parts thrilling and terrifying.
Yeah, right.
And so there was a time, especially as I was preparing my family and I to move here from Southern California to north of Georgia, of Atlanta. I remember feeling so overwhelmed and so stressed, and I read an old journal entry. And I stopped and thought about how I describe it as I'm walking through the halls of the life that I once asked for.
Wow.
And that reset for me was so powerful and impactful because of the conversation that I had with myself in my journal a year or two prior. So it's very valuable for us to be thinking about what's happening in here and in here, because that impacts, again, the way that we show up in the office.
Walking through the halls of the life you once wanted for yourself.
Yeah.
That's some powerful. This is, you know what? I can't wait till October. I don't want advanced winter and fall here in Minnesota, but these are big, giant concepts for my small brain. So that's big, walking through the halls. And I constantly journal. It's funny you say that, because I lately I've picked up the habit of just kind of going back a little bit. I have always thought about journaling as forward motion. It's down, move on. It's down, move on. And maybe that's some aspect of it. But I now that I hear this from you and other fractionals, if you're listening, take note, is when you go in reverse and walk through the halls of who you once were. What wonderful learning that is.
Absolutely. And there's something valuable in that, because as a forward-thinking person, then it gives you permission to really think about what you want to see ahead. So it's not even about only living in the past. It's about having gratitude for all of the things that you've gone through and that you experienced that brought you to this moment in time. And so when we think about fractional leadership and how different the job market is now and how different and kind of wobbly the economy is right now, and there's so many things happening in our world. So it might feel like maybe I'm not as confident as I thought I would be or could be, even though you still have all of this experience that you're bringing to the table. But just because it's in a fractional capacity or on a part-time basis, that doesn't mean that you're any less influential or impactful. It's really more time-bound than anything else. But we've got to know that in here. When I was an adjunct professor, I really look at fractional work as when I was an adjunct. And so adjunct is just another synonym for part-time.
Mm-hmm.
When I was teaching that class, though, John, my students didn't know the difference between whether I was an adjunct professor or full-time. They didn't care. Yeah, I was just their professor. Mm-hmm. I was the one that graded their speeches and read their papers. I was it for them. They didn't know that I didn't have an office because there's only one little adjunct office that we all shared in the department. I still represented the department as if I were a full-time instructor. And I think that there is that sense of ownership that we have to take to know that, like, I still add value here, even if my role has this adjective to describe it.
It's God, so many things. How are we going to keep all this in a half-hour show?
I don't know.
Hey everyone, Jake Stahl here, fractional CSO of Frac 2024. Are you ready to take your fractional business to the next level? Then get your gear ready for Frac 2024, the ultimate conference for fractional professionals. Now, let me assure you, this isn't just another boring conference. It's all about learning, community, and serious inspiration. You're going to walk away with a treasure trove of resources and support, so you won't be flying solo when you get back home. You'll rub elbows with industry leaders, soaking up invaluable insights and cutting-edge tools for business, such as AI integration, so you can be delivering knockout value to your clients. And the best part? You're going to feel inspired and pumped and ready to crush new goals and reach new heights. Oh, and did I mention sponsorships are still up for grabs for those who want to make an even bigger splash? So don't miss out. Learn more and sign up today at www.fractionalconference.com. And I will see you.
Everybody, I can't wait for October.
It's going to be very, very difficult. I can't remember if I wrote this or read it or picked it up somewhere, but it was the idea that communication is the work of the soul. I can't remember where I picked that up. I would love to claim it, but I'm not gonna.
Okay.
Somebody wrote it. But and what I picked up from that is, work often seems so robotic. It seems so repetitive and step repeat. And certainly in our world, we want to make things very systematic. But what's interesting, oftentimes with communication, you're connecting deeper. You're connecting one soul to another, one heart to another. One just different states of being that has to influence how you counsel people. This is almost a spiritual thing.
It is that, and I recognize now we didn't have language for this for me and my family in the 80s per se, but this is my gift. And a gift is something that I always say that thing that comes easily to you. I always say that your gift is somebody else's struggle. So that thing that is effortless and easy for you, when you own the gift, it's like a little box and you open it and like, oh, I like this. I'm going to keep this and I'm going to use it. Then you get to see the way that it impacts people. And I consider myself really fortunate and blessed that this is my natural gifting. So outside of the work, I'm happy that I've been able to build a career around my natural gifting. I have to also learn how to protect it, though. As how do you quantify?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like something that's so easy, and then charge for it and all that. And so I want to make the point that even if I weren't doing this, John, like I'm the one in Trader Joe's, like, how's your shift going? They're treating you all right? How are you looking people in the eye? I don't like to be on the phone in the drive-through at the Chick-fil-A. Like I really like to my interactions with people, because you just never know how you can impact someone's day by looking them in the eye and giving them a smile. When
did you come to the full realization that this was your gift? Communication was your gift.
Oh, wow. I will say, even as a kid, John, I remember completing sentences of adults as they'd be talking I would say, oh, what you mean is this, or like what you're trying to say, or I would just like name, and they would always kind of look like, how does she know that? How does she? And it wasn't until I got to undergrad. So my mother will tell you that I was a quiet child. I didn't have much to say, but when I had something to say, everybody had to listen. Like I was very declarative and sure of what I had to say. And so when I get to college, when I get to undergrad, I took a communication studies class. I didn't know such a thing existed. And I had the same professor twice, like for 2 days. It was like a small group class. And I also had her for public speaking. So, you build a rapport. And she said, Amber, I don't know that you know that you're like unusually good at this. Like, did you know that? And I said, no, I didn't know. And I looked up the major and learned. Back then we had these little books there, we could flip through the majors.
Sure.
That was the first time I saw myself, and that I had a sense of understanding myself in terms of how my way with people and my way with words is my superpower.
And I love that you used that word superpower. And as someone who counsels fractional pros every day, and that's one of there's so many big struggles with this, which we can get people through, right?
Yeah.
But the imposter syndrome factor, it attacks a lot of people. And I find myself when I do one-on-one coaching or in our cohorts, I say this, I'm like, you all have a special gift, and people will resist that.
They'll reject that. Yeah, for sure.
Reject it. I'm like, no, don't lean into it. Go find it. And I say, pull it out. That's half the work, is pull it out. And, I was a leader at this company, or I was a C-level at that company, or I did this. I'm like, nope, I want you to think about your gifts, because that's different than the chores that you've been doing in corporate for a long time. You have gifts. And I am a firm believer, and I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary, that every single human being on this earth has at least one amazing gift, if not more.
It's hard to recognize. And so in all fairness and defense of your clients, it is hard to recognize it when you're just being you. So, your previous question was, when did I know? I didn't know, because this is how I've always been. And it's not until you engage with the gift and you decide to use it, or thinking about, if you're a listener listening to this later, what is it that people ask you about all the time? Hey, how do you do XYZ thing? I call my sister. My sister is a nurse. She's the best problem solver I've ever met. Like, she can think of alternate scenarios with lightning speed. I'm able to help you think of what to say in lightning speed. So she, shout out to our parents, I guess, right?
Yeah, right.
But, fundamentally, I absolutely agree with you that we all have our little something, whatever it is, but that's how to frame it, to kind of get closer to it, to say, what do you consistently give advice on? And my very first website, my business website, used to be talktoamber.com.
Oh, wonderful.
When people would have a question or a scenario, a situation, they were like, oh my God, I got to talk to Amber. Like, how do I say this? I need to talk to Amber. And that was how I learned, again, that notion of being unusually good. And I could help people with these abilities. And I'm still doing it, and I still love it. And I'm so grateful.
It's important work, and you found it yourself, and everybody has it. And it's when you do discover it, yours is communication. You teach on it, you study it, you're going to share a bunch about it at FRAC. It's unbelievable. Everybody has that power. And I encourage you if you're listening, to take time, go sit on a rock or walk in the woods and let it find you, because it will find you if you're struggling with it. I got to do a couple of business commercials for our listening audience, so they know, not really commercials, but for those of you listening, thank you. We're here with Dr. Amber Wright. She's going to share a lot about communication with leaders and authentic communication at FRAC coming up. FRAC is at the end of October. You can find, let's see, I think we got some VIP tickets left. So go to the Fractional Conference website for that. And our new study that we did on the state of fractional is there as well. So beautiful, wonderful research that really illuminates everything from what the mindset is, to where the sales come from, to all the things for this wonderful new fractional economies. So those are some business things they had to do. So people know, they knew they can go get more of this. So
we love a VIP experience, right?
The VIP experience. Yeah, right. Exactly. So we want people to come in and get as much value out of it as they can. Fractional is, as I say, it's a community. You know, it's
I can tell that so far.
You can feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people find a lot of relief in that. I think a lot of folks that come out of corporate America or just don't want to live that life anymore, they miss a nourishing community where you can have people who support you and listen to you, and that's a lot of what fractional is. Okay, a little bit more about what you're going to talk about without giving anything away.
Yeah.
What else are you going to share, or do you want people to take away from what you share coming up in October?
You know, I think that attendees can expect to walk away from my session with a little bit more clarity on, again, how they're showing up. Because I'm a teacher by trade and by passion, and so being a professor, I love that I just broadened my classroom.
Yeah, you did.
Teaching on a college classroom now, I teach all over the globe through my computer, which I'm very grateful for. And so I think that what people say that they get out of my sessions is they'll see it on the agenda and Hoover or what have you, and say, oh yeah, okay, this looks good. But then they walk out and say, I didn't know I needed that. And as a teacher, I am a stickler for practicality. I like giving people things that they can do today to help them take the steps forward that they want to take, or just, again, feel more confident about their abilities as a person and also as a leader. So I think if folks have questions that they're dying to ask, they can leverage the Hoover app for that purpose. From what I understand, you can go in there and, kind of communicate that way. I may not make any responses beforehand, obviously, but if I get a chance and I see them, and, Q&A is always like the best. To me, that's where the magic happens at a conference, outside of the hallways, because then that's when you really get to give what the people come to receive. So, I'm excited about that. I hope that people feel a little less impostery when they start to think about some of these things. Because I'll say, John, that does not resonate with me. When I read the original study, because I was kind of entertaining the idea of writing my dissertation on imposter syndrome. And so when I read the original study, I was like, oh, I don't have that. Now it's evolved over the years, and we all could, the language is very resonant. We all kind of know what that means. Like, oh, I'm pretending. But to me, it really comes down to this question of deservedness. The women in the original study didn't feel like they deserved the recognition that they had achieved. And that's the point that I don't make contact with, because I've worked very hard and long and diligently to have the things that I have in my life, both personally and professionally. So I reject the notion that when I show up in certain spaces that I am not really being my authentic self because I'm an imposter. Yeah. You get the same version of me no matter what room we stand in. Now, obviously, communication is contextual, and we know that. But inherently, though, you're going to get the same Amber. And that's me owning the fact that I am uniquely who I am and who I say I am.
Yeah, it's an imposter syndrome has been studied so much. Yeah. And it has really been dissected. And George Clooney has it, and Oprah Winfrey has it, and FDR had it. Like, these people that you like, heroes, right? Yeah. Heroes. And so you come to understand it's very much a human condition. But I contend the stronger you build yourself up in areas that really matter to your soul and to others around you, and communication is one of them. I'm coming out of this podcast, and I will come out of your session at FRAC. Like, I'm going to be 1,000 times stronger in communication. And if I already am, like, just by listening, right? Like, I'm going to write in this for a half hour after, and that makes me a stronger communicator. And when you think of all the things that, in order to be happy and thriving, life is a constant state of developing skills.
It is. And
I have no desire to go develop my programming skills. I don't want to learn how to write code, right? But if I can be a better communicator tomorrow than I am today, in whatever way, interpersonal, outside, that is going to serve me, those I love, those I care for, those I serve exponentially.
Absolutely.
It's a big one. And you've chosen it as your career. Speaking of that, when you're not doing conferences at FRAC, tell us a little bit, what's your practice, what's your business, how we can support you, where we can find you. Talk about the Amber footprint, if you could, just for a minute.
Yes, absolutely. The hub of all Amber-related activity is wordswellsaid.com.
I love that title.
Thank you. wordswellsaid.com. I'm
for
also
a life well lived.
For life, yes, words.
I love that in there.
Yeah. Words well said for a life well lived, because that's what I want. That's what I want you to have. That's why all this matters. Because I say in my TEDx talks about ask better questions, that relationships are life's greatest currency, and to be interpersonally wealthy, that comes by communication. And I want you to be interpersonally wealthy. I want you to have relationships that nourish you and fulfill you and that feel reciprocal. And so much of that comes by way of the things that we say, the things that we don't say, and how we said them. So words well said for a life well lived. I'm also active on Instagram under that same handle. And then obviously on LinkedIn, if you search for Dr. Amber L. Wright, that's me in the pink sweater. Yeah. And I look forward to connecting and engaging with everyone who listens to this and also who attends the conference in October.
Well, I'm going to be all over your Instagram page, because I like to consume good information. And so for those of you listening, and I can't believe we're already at a half hour. This is crazy.
I know, this flew by.
But I know it flew by. But, I'm going to leave everybody with a thought. If you feel like you're great in communication, you probably have something to learn. But if you feel like you can be stronger in a very important dimension called communication of your life, please come to FRAC. Please find Amber. Please improve yourself in that area, because there's nothing but upside for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
For coming today. This has been great. I've learned, and it's not all about me, but I got to say, I took a lot from this, even this short moment. So thank you.
I've done my job. All I had to do was just show up, right?
That's right. Just show up. Yeah. So, well, for everybody listening, go to the Fractional Conference website. We'll see you in October. Download the State of Fractional. Make sure you get your VIP ticket, because I know those aren't, there's some left, but you want to get the deal if you can. So hop on that. And Amber, I'll see you in October.
So yeah, countdown's on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everybody listening, thank you. We'll sign out of the WTF podcast for now.
Thanks for tuning in to What the Frac. Don't forget to register for the 2024 Fractional Conference at www.fractionalconference.com. See you next time.